In this episode of the Human Advisor podcast, N'Jie Konte of Dare to Dream Financial Planning joins me to talk about how she went independent with confidence and how adding value to your clients will ultimately lead to growth. Don't miss it. Tune in.
I think it's just when you come from the heart and you come with that heart of service and really wanting to provide value in an aligned way that people really resonate with that. And it just, it comes.
You're tuned in to another episode of the Human Advisor podcast. I'm your host, Asarte Yarnway, head of community at Altruist. And for me, this woman needs no introduction. My good friend, N'Jie Konte. Anna, how you doing?
I'm good, Asarte. How are you?
It's so great to see you.
I'm glad to be here. This is an honor.
It's an honor for me, and it's the first time we've met in person, which is crazy to me because I've done, numerous podcasts with you.
Yeah.
I've been on panels with you virtually, and this is the first time meeting you. It's a pleasure.
It is. It's such a pleasure. It feels like I'm just meeting the whole Altruist crew. It's like a coming together.
I wanted to just hop right in, right? You started Dare to Dream Planning, and I know that your route in the industry was not easy to find your space, to amplify your voice, and to just take space, own space, right? Yeah. So let's talk about how you found finance and what that journey was like for you.
Yeah. So, it was very fortuitous. God, the universe, whatever you believe in, has its alignments for us to find, where we're supposed to be, right? Mm-hmm. So I graduated in the middle of the Great Recession, trying to find whatever job I could. I found a job that required me to speak Spanish. I speak Spanish fluently, so it was, I ended up learning more about wealth management through that job that I have. And I said, you know what, I think this might work for me. Even though I had absolutely no finance background, I studied literature in college. I had no idea about markets. That's not something I grew up learning about at all. But it ended up, marrying a lot of the things that I was really good at together. And so that's just, it's a history from there. It's 10 years now. And I don't regret it at all.
Once you hit that 10 years, you're like a industry vet, right? So I'm sure you've learned a lot along the way. Let's talk about that first gig, because I remember in one of our prior conversations way back, you were like, I knew I wanted to be an advisor, but did they start you in like a lesser position at first? Talk about that.
Yeah, so my first job in the industry was at Bernstein Global Wealth Management as an assistant, right? And so I worked for a really big team of a few different advisors, right? Just helping them with the administrative stuff, client servicing. And, I really saw, I had an advisor who was 40 years in the game at that point, right? He was the biggest advisor there. I had one who was sort of middle of his career, maybe 10 years in, and then I had somebody who was right out of the training program that I supported. And that allowed me to see sort of what building a business was like and what sort of the end result it was like. And it allowed me to see the trajectory. But, and I didn't necessarily know I could be an advisor at that point. I knew I wanted to work more with clients, but, there was so much emphasis at that point on, your network, right? Like they were very big on, what school did you go to? Do you have the right network? Where, what do your parents do? And so me, from the background that I'm from, that didn't feel like it was going to be a viable option.
Natural, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, well, I don't go to country clubs. I've never been to a country club,
To this day.
Literally never. Golf, no, right? And nothing against that, but that's just not my, my environment. And so it took me a while to really see that it was viable for me. I switched careers. I switched companies. And once I started to see other women advisors, right, that was when I started to see that didn't come from that same background, that I could see that, maybe this is something I could really do.
Did you feel like you had to move companies to excel or to take the next step in your career, and why?
Yeah, 100%. I just felt, that was a real theme of my career and something I meditated on, before I came to chat with you today. I always felt like, I had the work ethic, right? I had the drive, I have the energy, right? Like my mother-in-law calls me Tasmanian devil. Like I'm up and I'm moving and I'm always striving for that high mark. But it never felt like the results, what I was getting from my work was from, my employers or my bosses or whatever, was really matching up to that. And so, I relocated to the DC area from New York, tried my hardest. I got my CFP, got different life and health insurance, all of these licenses, things that you think are supposed to really help you go to the next level. And I
Propel you.
still, exactly, and I still was being told, wait, it's not your time yet, wait, maybe next year. And after a while, like I was like, listen, it's, I have things I'm trying to do, right? I got babies at home. I'm trying to make a life and make a change in my family, right? And so, I'm not going to operate on somebody else's timeline. It just wasn't going to do it for me.
So Tasmanian Devil,
Yeah.
right? That doesn't, like, you earned that nickname, right? You have extreme drive. I've seen you, I don't know, for the last year and a half, really grow your presence and grow your business. But where does that come from? I know that you're half Puerto Rican, half Gambian, right? Tell us about your upbringing and how that influenced you.
Yeah, so, I'm first generation American. My mom is Puerto Rican. My dad is from the Gambia. And that's like the biggest gift I ever got, is having that background, because it allowed me to, really see how different people live, right? Really understand different cultures, and also be very rooted and grounded in culture, right? And in my family. And in a way that I don't know that I would have been otherwise, right? And so, that, I think there's a sense of urgency that we feel coming from that background, that, I want to do better. I have to make my parents' sacrifices worth it. You know what I mean? Like, I have to put out the effort and build on all of the things that they did, right? Like, they did amazing things with, my mom. My mom was a single mom, teen mom, right? She was the first in our family to go to college, right? Nobody has ever gotten more than a high school education in our entire family. My dad picked up with a suitcase, didn't tell anybody he was coming to America, right? And just, started from scratch and is doing beautifully now. But it's like, I want to make all of that sacrifice and that risk and the steps that they took, and just take it to the next level.
You don't want to let them down.
No.
At all, right? And I
no.
look at it as like a relay race, right? Yeah. They came, and I think that first leg of the race has the biggest responsibility, right? Because if you fall coming out the blocks, if you stumble, you lose time, you lose a lot in that one thing. So they did that. Like, my parents came from Liberia, from a war-torn country, gave me the baton, and I think you would agree that it's our chance to kind of pass it on and give our kids that head start, right?
Absolutely.
That we were given. I want to talk about just what it means to be a first-generation American, right? No matter how you phrase it, I call myself first generation Liberian American, whatever the case is. What does that mean to you, and what responsibility? Talk about the tax, the black tax, right? That we all have as we excel in our careers.
Yeah, I feel like we're always kind of sandwiched between two different realities, right? So we are, we're here, we're in America, we're very focused on, the American system and navigating and learning that, which can be a challenge, depending on your family background, right? To figure out the system and how to excel and take things to the next level, right? But then you also are sort of one foot back home, wherever that may be, right? And so you are trying your hardest to stay connected culturally, in terms of family ties, right? Keeping in touch with people, going to visit, and also, really helping to share the prosperity that we have. Even if things are hard here, it can be harder there, right? It can be a lot harder there, exactly. And so, it's a balancing act to try and, navigate those two and do so gracefully and feeling like you're honoring both. And you're able to manage both. I think it's a lot easier now. When we were younger, I think it was, you kind of had to make a choice, right? Now I think there's a whole new generation of us that are really focused on taking the best of what our background gives us, and then, taking the best America has to offer us and making something out of it.
What struggles do you find having this tax of being a first generation American, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that, we're financial advisors, right? So some of the stuff that you're charged to do is not by the book, right? Like, I pay my cousin's tuition for her kid and for her apartment in Liberia, because without that, she wouldn't have a place to live.
Literally.
So like, how do you balance this perspective, and financial planning? How do you give advice? Because you understand that, there's responsibilities on the back end.
This is one of those like really emotionally fraught things that I deal with my clients a lot. It can be really hard, and I think there's so much shame and stress and pressure that's all wound up in this idea of helping, whether that be parents here or family, in country of origin, right? Personally, it's a big balance for me and my husband. My husband's also first generation American, right? The other day he was telling me, personal story. My father-in-law called me. He was like, "Your husband never answers the phone," and he's like, "Tell my son to call me." And I was like, "Okay, well, fine. I'll tell him to call you." And I told my husband, he's like, "Listen, I've talked to my mom and I talked to my dad, but he's trying to text me right now, and, and I'm not accepting this particular text." It's a balancing act, and I think you have to have some kind of boundaries around it, right? You have to have some kind of sense of, what you want to support, what matters to you. So for me personally, right, I'm always happy to pay school fees, right? I'm always going to help my parents and my in-laws, in whatever way I can. And above and beyond that, it's going to be maybe when I go back to Gambia, I go to Puerto Rico, I can give people some stuff, but it's not necessarily, going to be a sustained way. But I think what's really important is just figuring out what your boundaries are, whether that be individuals you want to support, dollar amounts, you want to put it towards it, percentage of income, whatever it may be, and sticking to that so that you can continue to build wealth and build financial stability for yourself while also, honoring your family and your roots and the people that made you who you are.
That makes sense. So why Dare to Dream planning, right? Because you went from this place where you had to really fight for your space. You had to create space.
Yeah.
You had to create your voice. And I see that voice and we hear it on social media. But what made you say, hey, I'm going to take the next step and start my own practice?
Yeah. I think I just got tired of saying no, of people saying no to me, right? And tell me to wait. And, my husband definitely encouraged me. He'd been telling me for a long time, like, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. I don't come from an entrepreneurial family, right? But I come from a family that is very determined and very stubborn, right? So when we want to get something done, when we have our mindset to something, we do it, right? And so I got to a point where I was feeling very stagnant and frankly really dissatisfied, career-wise. I knew that I really liked the essence of what I was doing, but it just didn't feel satisfying.
Yeah.
And so I just made the choice to leave. And, as I was making that choice, I just kept thinking about, what's my why, right? Like what's motivating me? And truthfully, the women, I feel so fortunate that I've been loved so well in my life, right? But in particular by the women in my life, right? My mom was such an example of strength and endurance, right? My grandmother also, my older sisters, I have two sisters that are much older than me. And I saw them really like trying so hard throughout their life. And I wanted to, be able to give someone like them the tools to be able to live life intentionally and to be able to serve them in a way that would allow them to, make their life what they actually wanted to and not have finances be a hindrance.
Yeah. That's my goal as well. Now, talk to me about the fears, right? Because we talk about going independent with confidence here at Altruist, right? And that has to be the scariest time for a lot of advisors to say, hey, I'm going to leave this institution where I know that I'm going to get benefits, right? A consistent paycheck, right? Compliance will be taken care of for me. Marketing will be taken care of for me. And now I have to figure out how to do this by myself.
Yeah.
How was that journey for you?
Yeah, so, I'm sure you experienced this, Desarte, but I think when you're first generation American, like everything feels a little bit more risky, right? Like you don't have much to fall back on, right? And so my husband and I, for many years, were very intentional about setting our own finances up so that we could be flexible and sort of have that safety net for ourselves, create that for ourselves. I'm very fortunate that I have a wonderful partner who was like, I got you, honey, like you go off and you do your thing, so benefits and all of that. But it was really scary to leave, a very well-paying job, very secure. My bosses were very happy with me. I could have stayed there another 20 years and it would have been fine, right? But I just knew that I'm not somebody that's satisfied with like the bare minimum. And so it just emotionally, I had to take that leap. Financially, I think, and support-wise, I'm very resourceful. And so I was just like, you know what, I can research, I can figure it out. It is hard. I think for me, I didn't have a whole book that I was trying to bring over, or wasn't used to, being an advisor for 20 years and trying to go independent at that point. So it was a little bit easier that way. But at the same time, with a little bit of perseverance, I think, and intentionality and focus and willing to bet on myself, that was all I needed.
So you focus on women and entrepreneurs, correct?
Yeah.
So talk to me about why you chose that specific niche for your business.
So I talked about my mom and my family. I think I saw so many strong women in my life who had they had everything, right? They did all the right things, and they didn't necessarily have the tools in terms of that knowledge of how to leverage all of those good things that they had done to create that wealth and that financial stability for themselves, right? And so, I knew I wanted to support women from the outset. The entrepreneur came, I think, just naturally, right? Like, you find your rhythm. But I started to see that there were so many clients that I had that were willing to make that bet on themselves, right? That they were willing to leave their job, or they wanted to make a plan to do so. And, they had similar profiles as me, right? Like, they didn't have much wealth financially in terms of their family. They didn't have much to fall back on. And so they really needed to be very intentional and very careful. And they had a unique set of needs there, especially most of them are women of color, right? And so I wanted to, marry my own experiences as an entrepreneur, as a woman of color, as a business owner, and as a financial advisor, to help them really marry the personal finance, the business finance, and really, make those decisions and allow themselves to take things to the next level, right? Like, have that bet really pay off.
Yeah, let's talk about practice management for a minute, right? Because I think that when you are serving women, it's a little different because the concerns can be different sometimes, right? So how is your approach different for that demographic than it would be for like the traditional, hey, I want to retire at some point, right? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think that's compounded because my clients are younger, right? Like, my oldest clients, I work with women from 30 to 50. I think I lead with empathy and education. I think that's really the most important thing, right? I'm a very heart-centered person, and that shows in my practice, right? So my goal is really to create a safe space for my clients to be able to bring up, ask the stupid questions, quote unquote, right? Ask the things that they might not necessarily feel comfortable asking a man, or even like, having certain conversations in front of their husbands. Maybe they just want to talk to me and they feel like they can have a safe, open space to have those conversations that are not always so comfortable. And I lead with that education also, right? Like, we're talking about women of color who might not come from wealth, who, they have a great job, but they don't necessarily understand, what's a Roth IRA, what's a 401k, what is a SEP IRA, why does that benefit them as a business owner, right? And so my goal is to really, keep it simple in terms of explanations, empowering them financially, really helping them have a role in the decision making, right? Or putting them in the front seat of the decision making, and having me just serve as a sounding board versus, telling them this is what you got to do, and or trying to take over things completely. I really want to empower them so that they're able to also feel like, they got this.
Right. You said something that stuck out to me, making them the decision maker, right? I think a lot of the times advisors position themselves as the hero in the client's story versus them making the client the hero in their own story. Yeah. So what ways are you allowing the client to be the hero in their own story? What does that look like within your practice?
Yeah, so I feel like all my clients are heroes, right? Like, I could tell you 100 stories about them that, like, they blow my mind, and I smile from ear to ear after I get off a call with them, right? I think, making them see what the continued effort that they've been putting in can do for themselves and their family is huge. Like, that's like when I see them beam, right? Yeah. Okay, you're earning however much you are now. If you continue to grow your business at the pace you've grown, or continue to grow your income at the pace you've grown, this is what the result is going to be. I think when they see that, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, like, they feel like, oh my God, like, where's my cape? You know what I mean? And I think also just, letting them know, like, I'm not the one that's actually creating this for them, right? I'm the one that's helping them make giving them the information to make the decisions, right? But they're the ones that are actually creating this, and it's just a different vibe, right? Yeah. Like, it's not, it doesn't depend on me. It depends on them and their intentionality and their continued effort.
I think that advisor can't build a house for the client, right?
Yeah.
Our job is to give the client the tools necessary for them to build their own house. Yeah. And somewhere in this whole thing, right? I don't know if it was in the 80s or the 90s, it switched. Yeah. Like, they're expecting us to do the work, or we are trying to be the superhero in the story. Like, no, this is you. You're phenomenal as you are. My job is to add value and speak more life into the things that you want to do already, right? You've grown exponentially over the last year and a half that I've been really paying attention. What are some secrets to that growth, right? Because I know a lot of advisors want to know how I can take my business from 0 to 10 million, how I can take my business from 10 to 50, or how I can just work with people that I love to work with. What would you say have been successful tactics for you in your practice?
Yeah, I think really just tuning in to myself and like what it is that I want and where I think I can add the most value, and tuning out the noise, right? That has been one of the most instrumental things that I've done over the last, 3 years, is really turn inwards and be very intentional about that, and not necessarily making decisions from the standpoint of what are other people doing, right? What do I want to do? What is going to be, what do I want to talk about? What do people actually, the people I want to serve and that light me up to serve, need from me, right? And then trying to figure out, obviously within the financial planning, financial advisory space, how I can fill in those gaps, right? And I'm so grateful for the fact that I am, I'm my own boss, right? That I can speak clearly, that I can speak intentionally, that I can speak, without, massaging my words too much or worrying about what other people are going to think, right? And that I can really speak directly to my clients in a way that feels natural to me, that that they resonate with, and that actually serves them, right? I think so oftentimes, I'm sure you've experienced this, Asarte, I was I wouldn't say shell of myself, but like a very diminished version of myself at my previous employers. And that's, function of being the only Black woman around, the only Latina around, the only woman that's a mother in my, team or even in my office, right? And so stepping into that power, stepping into that voice attracted, it felt like it was in alignment for me, and then it also attracted my clients, right? And they come to me saying things like, which is wild to me to this day, right? I'm talking about IRAs and stock options and stuff, and they're coming to me like, I read your newsletter and I started crying. I'm like, Lord, like what am I putting in that newsletter, or what was I doing? But I think it's just when you come from the heart and you come with that heart of service and really wanting to provide value in an aligned way, that people really resonate with that, and it just it comes.
You know what's crazy? The fact that as advisors, we expect for our clients to pour out their hearts to us, right? We want to know everything about them.
Yes.
We want to know their deepest fears, their desires, their accounts. We have access to their private information, social security, date of birth, kids' names, grandparents, all of this stuff. But we are unwilling to remove the veil for ourselves, right? We're unwilling to say, hey, these are things that I struggle with. This is what I'm going through, right? These are things that I've had to correct. These are the traumas that I've faced. And I think once you are able to do that, right, you begin to connect with your clients on a human level, because they're humans first. And if we do that, I think everything comes after that, right? I talked to Larry Sprung the other day, and I'm like, hey, on the other side of vulnerability comes all the growth that an advisor is looking for. But it's unfortunate that not many advisors want to go there in terms of vulnerability.
Yeah, totally. It's huge. And I think the thing is, right, the financial services industry is not the most hospitable environment for vulnerability, especially as a person of color. Right. So I understand why we tend to be more guarded. But at the same time, you as advisors, our value is the human connection, understanding people from a qualitative standpoint, right? And then being able to marry the quantitative stuff with that. And if we don't get the human part right, like the rest of that is just, like, there's online calculators for this stuff, there's retirement, they don't need us for that. I mean, granted, it's what helps, but they don't really need us necessarily for just that. They need us for understanding their goals and their dreams and their aspirations, and to help them sort of overcome some of those traumas or those shortcomings that they might have financially, or, short-sightedness, and to help them get to where they're trying to go and create the life that they're actually aspiring to.
Absolutely. I think financial advisor is the wrong title for what we do. I think we're investment counselors, right? On one side, we deal with the math, we deal with the numbers and all that stuff. On the other side, we have to counsel people through real life baggage a lot of the times, right? And if you do both well, you're providing impact and value to a person's life. Now, I have an exercise for you that I want you to do, all right?
Okay.
Think about yourself when you got that job as an assistant, right? I think that as a man, although I am an underrepresented financial advisor in the space, I'm still a man. And the industry has 80% men in the industry, all right? What could a man in that position, what could he have done to help you feel comfortable and confident to really take charge of your career, maybe earlier, or feel confident about what you do? You're already confident, by the way. But how can we support you?
Yeah.
Because I want the advisor that's listening to this right now in his office or, working from home, maybe on his Peloton, to think about it and really try to go out and make some change. What can we do to help?
Ooh, there's a lot there. I would say, I think asking is the first thing, right? Like, just because we as women and work environments can be different. We as women are different, but I think asking the women what it is that they want to do, what they want to know, where they want to go, and helping them figure out how they need to do that, right? And we're talking about mentorship, we're talking about sponsorship, right? Really being a vocal advocate for someone in your professional life is so, so important, right? Those doors are open for men, especially white men, more than they are for others in terms of the industry. Just basic numbers, right? And so, if you can go to the women in your office and say, hey, where are you trying to go? How can I help you figure out the roadmap to get there? That would have been so instrumental. And, I feel very fortunate that I did have a boss that was very good at that. And I think that he was my last boss. And I think there's no small coincidence that he did that and was able to, really allow me to think that I could achieve some of those things, or even, that there was someone who had my back there, and that was really, really empowering.
That's awesome. Last question for you.
Yeah.
All right. If you can give one piece of personal advice and business advice to your former self, what would those two pieces of advice be?
Ooh. I think so. One of the biggest lessons I learned from my family, and I think I forgot about for a little bit, but was really joy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I grew up in such a joyful household, and I got caught up in the seriousness of life, and I failed to follow that joy. And when I rediscovered that joy is when, the world opened its arms for me, right? And I feel very blessed for that. So I would say, just follow your joy, follow your aspirations, follow what really feels right for you. And then the rest will figure itself out, right? I think from a business standpoint, I think, you can just always figure it out, right? You don't have to have it perfect from the outset. That is one of those things that I think we, especially in this space, right? We want everything picture perfect. We want to be super polished. We want to have everything figured out. And I was a little bit guilty of that at first, but I sort of shed that a bit now and just say, start, get it done, launch imperfectly, do things imperfectly.
I love it. I love it. One of my favorite quotes is, if you are such person, then why worry about such thing? So for me, I would always try to focus on making myself the type of person that could run a business, that can give sound advice, that can help people work through their issues, right? That can be a listener, right? And I see you as that person, and I'm sure your clients are happy, and we are extremely happy to have you on this show. Before I let you go, talk to the people, let them know how they can keep up with everything you're doing at your firm, your podcast, and in between.
Yeah, so in terms of socials, I hang out mostly on Instagram and Twitter. It's N'Jie Konte is my handle, and my website is daretodreamplanning.com, right? And that's usually where you can find everything. Subscribe to my newsletter, and you'll see all the things that I'm up to.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Anna, and thank you all for watching yet another episode of the Human Advisor Podcast. And make sure to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm Desarte Yarnway. We'll see you here again soon.